Welcome to Getting Rich Together, the show for successful women who are looking to take their financial futures to the next level. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. When I started my wealth building journey, nobody knocked on my door to give me all the answers. So I want to talk to the experts who've done it and bring the answers to you so we can discover the right opportunities that will help us achieve the financial futures we've always dreamed of, together, and have fun doing it. So let's dive into this episode and start getting rich together. I am here today with the incredible Laurie Wood of Evolution Financial Coaching. Laurie, you are someone who came highly recommended to me because of the work that you're doing in evangelizing the healing and the exposition of how we manage our money stories, what we can turn them into, and how powerful money can be in our lives, which is really just such an important topic, certainly on this podcast. Welcome to Getting Rich Together, Laurie, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Laurie, of course, these journeys that lead us to leading lives and livelihoods around the education of money, certainly these stories have come from somewhere. And where I always love to start this show off is the very beginning. So before Laurie was a financially savvy woman who was asking all the questions and pioneering and leading conversations, can you take us back to a young girl, what Laurie was like in the early days of her life, somewhere between 5 and 12 years old? What was life like for you?
Sure. Well, life was very hard back then. My parents divorced when I was, around the 9-year-old mark. So somewhere right in that middle. And I do remember as a younger child, 4 to 5 to 6, being in a family that felt sort of middle class. But like many women, when my parents divorced, my mom became reliant on public assistance. She didn't have any other way to make ends meet with, having 5 children under the age of, 13 at the time. It was a really tough time growing up. I, saw the stress that my mother was under. I saw the decisions that she made because she didn't know better how to do things. And all of that became learning for me. So educationally, I was learning a lot of life lessons at the time that I didn't know how they would come back up. Your 5 to 12-year-old self can't know that. But I definitely learned a lot by watching what was going on around me and understanding ways that I wanted to make sure that didn't happen in my life. So that's, kind of the 5 to 12-year-old self.
What were those early impressions, or were there any key moments that you think during that time period that really informed you?
I think just, watching how hard it was for my mom and just making sure that, I read a lot. I read every book available to me. So I just knew that there were better ways and that I wanted that for myself. There were ways to become educated, to go to college, I just became a seeker of knowledge at that younger point in my life, and spending time with friends whose families had a different situation than mine, and, being invited in to that world and to a different world was really, I think, also an important turning point for me. Parents, friends who really looked out for me. I can remember one time when I was, it's a little older, but I was 18 or 19, living in my first apartment and trying to furnish it. And one of my friend's dads, he owned some apartment buildings and someone had left some furniture. So he put it in his truck and brought it to my house and said, I thought you might be able to make use of some of this, which was really sweet. And it was just, another way of someone, helping to look out for me, for my younger self.
I love that. That's beautiful. So, moving into sort of these college years, I often find that college gives us this really first impression for most of us of the outside world in a different way. People coming together from so many different backgrounds and carrying with them at that point in time, typically the stories of their parents, and kind of testing them out into the world and seeing what it's like. What was college life like for you from a financial standpoint? Were you someone who was working through school? Were you, full-time student? What was life like for you, and how did you start to demonstrate early adulthood behaviors?
That's really an interesting question. So I was working at the Department of Education as a secretarial or support role, made a friend who was pretty instrumental in that younger portion of my life. I didn't go off to college, right after graduating high school because I needed to move out on my own and support myself. I was talking with a friend who also a daughter of a single mom. She said to me, you know what? You can start the process by doing community college and by taking some courses that you're going to need to take anyways to get a degree. Like, so, while I was 18 or 19, I started taking some community college classes and really just working towards finding out what I really wanted to do, right? So I took a number of classes, moved to a city in Vermont that was a little bit bigger. I moved to the Burlington, Vermont area and was able to work for an organization that ended up being a career that I had for 30 plus years. It was a healthcare technology organization that, helped to pay for some of my education. So I was working in a professional corporate environment while going to school. And those two things together, book learning, while in school and using that learning immediately in a corporate setting was really, I think, very helpful because it solidified that learning and education. And I was introduced to, the corporate world and to financials really early on because I became a budget manager pretty quickly in my career there. And, was able to, sort of look at how people were compensated. And that was an interesting piece when you look at the compensation, sort of moving into another topic between men and women, right? So the gender pay gap. So that was a pretty interesting.
When you first saw people's paychecks and you first saw salaries, it's a really interesting moment because not everyone gets the opportunity to see that so early on in their careers. What were some of the things that you picked up on or noticed? And then how did that inform you? I feel like there are certain things in our life that once you know them, you can't unknow. It's like, oh, now I will always know this, and this will now inform my decisions whether or not I intend them to. So after there was you before that moment of seeing all the salaries, and then after the moment of seeing all the salaries, what changed for you?
Well, what was interesting was that, the department that I worked in was customer support, and that's what I was managing, and it was pretty female dominated. So a lot of, customer support organizations are. Dollar for dollar, salary-wise, the salaries were pretty consistent between men and women. What was different most of the time was the benefit cost. So the cost of the organization of providing healthcare, for example. Some people were taking advantage of the family plan, so they would, in effect, get more pay from the organization because their salary, while it might be the same, the organization was paying a higher level of benefit for that married person with a family than they were for maybe a single person or woman who was working but not having the family benefit. It was very interesting. And I remember having a conversation with our CFO about it, and it hadn't really crossed his mind, maybe because it wasn't his mind and men were the providers in those days, right? But it was just interesting to just the perspective that I had and started talking with my manager and others about.
How fascinating that you got to have these really early on experiences around knowing and kind of understanding the dynamics beyond just, let's say, a salary, right? The total compensation packages, what makes up someone's income coming in. And then certainly from a personal standpoint, probably one of the first times you were able to think about things like maybe savings or a 401k or something to that effect. When did you start making those incremental investments into yourself in these particular ways?
Pretty early on. The company that I worked for was really good about bringing in different employee benefits. So we had a discounted program through Morgan Stanley where we could invest. The financial advisors would come in and give presentations. So I took advantage of sitting in on all those presentations, starting to learn that language and what things meant and putting some money in the market. And I can remember the first $2,500 that I invested, lost every cent. But, all of those things are experience and learning. So it was interesting, but also in investing in my 401k. So it was really early on and making sure that the people on my team also were, as I was learning these things, I would make sure that everyone that worked in the team took advantage of all of those employee benefits as well. Things like putting money into the 401k and taking advantage of other benefits we had, like legal supports. The company that I worked for, where you got legal benefits. So if someone was buying a house or writing their will or whatever other legal support, so there are lots of benefits that equate to dollars saved for employees. So just making sure that people knew about those kinds of things.
It's really valuable. It seems like you've continuously in your life been a vocal point for people to learn more and to evangelize, smart financial decisions. At what point did you start to create wealth where you were able to go, what else can I do with this? What else does this mean to me? When did your values and sort of deeper understanding of self with money really start to kick in your career?
That is a really good question. I think it was in the period when I moved to San Francisco and was earning a bit more money at that time. Buying property in California is not achievable for a lot of people, and I didn't know if it was going to be achievable for me. But I knew that investing in real estate was something that was really important to help sort of start to build that personal net worth and wealth. I'd read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which was a really interesting book about real estate investing. So I called my sister, who lived in Vermont at the time, and I was like, you know what? You and I need to do this. I'm going to put up the money, and she had some money as well. So we each put up, you're going to manage the on-site. We're going to buy some properties in Vermont, and I'm going to manage all the financials because I live far away. And we did that. We bought 2 apartment buildings, cash flowed. They were a retirement program, piece of each of our retirement program. We were able to provide housing for people. There were occasions when we would discount rent and do things to help people that needed some help. And it was a way to just kind of start to teach the next generation. My sister had children who we would hire to come in and help her with stuff. The twins that were probably teenagers at the time, and her son, learned the value of working and earning money by helping us do some of the cleaning occasionally or painting or something like that. So it was really a multi-generational investment to build some assets used to sort of grow that personal net worth and wealth.
That's exciting. And what were some of the early feelings that you remember? I think sometimes there are things that we put on the list of things we want to do, things we want to achieve and have. And then there's obviously the anticipation of what that feeling will be, arriving to the moment and feeling it, and then sort of the aftermath and the reflection part of it, being in this early wealth building stage and buying multiple properties, right, it's fast and furious. It wasn't exactly like, oh, I dipped my toe and then I dipped my toe. It was like, boom, universe, here I am. So what were you anticipating sort of these feelings to be like, and how did it flow through onto the other side?
In a similar time period, I did buy my first property in San Francisco, and I bought a condo or a 2-unit building with some friends that we rented together in the same building. So we bought another building near us in that configuration because we knew we could work together and live together in a 2-unit building. I just remember when we were approved for the building, I just sat down and I thought, why is someone giving me a mortgage for $1 million? Right? Because it's like the two of you are on the board. So I was like, wait a second, how did I get to this point from where I started? And I was scared. I was like, what happens if I can't pay this? And, I remember talking with my friends who were a married couple, and he was like, if it doesn't work out, we can always sell it. And if there's a problem, we'll figure it out together because we're doing this together. And I'm like, oh, you're right. And it was never a problem. We both knew we could afford it, and, it worked out very well. But I just remember that, oh my God, who am I to think I can do this? So it took a while to really be like, okay, I can do this, and I can do this very well, and I can help other people do it as well.
Yeah. During this sort of real estate adventure, how many properties would you say that you ended up transacting on?
2 residential real estate buildings that I purchased with my sister. Went in on a investment property with some friends in Hawaii. That was a venture that didn't make money because it was around 2008 when the real estate market crashed. I had purchased my own home before I moved to California and sold that when I moved, and then I purchased a home in California.
That's really cool. And then did feelings change at all between the first and the last? Did you get more and more comfortable with the nuances of risk and certainly within real estate, or did it kind of feel the same the whole time?
No, I totally got comfortable with it. So from that moment of, oh my God, am I really signing on for this mortgage, to when my partner's having children and needed a bigger place to live and they were selling out and I brought someone else into the building, because it's a shared mortgage when it's a 2-unit building until you take a condo, and we hadn't taken the building condo. So I brought another person into it, and I had to have the conversation with them that my partners had with me at the start was, we can do this. There's no problem. Like, you're signing on for this, and we'll separate it as soon as we can. Because when you take the building condo, you actually can then separate the mortgage, which we ended up doing. So we went through that. That property was bought and refinanced and refinanced and refinanced. So there was a lot of education and learning that went on throughout that whole process. Much easier the second, third, and fourth time.
Sure. So one of the things I think is so fascinating about money and wealth building is obviously not only what resources can afford you to do, but also like as you get more in touch with your money stories and what your resources can do, things around you start to change. You know, sometimes you notice friend group changes or, you know, family dynamics change, right? And all of a sudden there's a shift in how you see yourself, but certainly in how others see and perceive you. During your kind of life, as we're reflecting on these moments of risk and building consciousness around money and exercising wealth, how did the other components of your life kind of start to shift around you?
Yeah, well, when you mentioned sort of the friend group, like, you know, my friend group at the time, we were all sort of similarly in careers, right? So we were all in professional careers in the early 30s in the San Francisco Bay Area. The group was interesting in that some people came from a higher socioeconomic ground, but were making, you know, less and had difficulty affording some things. And then other folks were, you know, myself and others included, were able to do all the things that we wanted to do, travel where we wanted to travel and do those things. And, you know, we were all young and no children, and it was easy to do. But you do find yourself, and I think especially as a woman sometimes, underplaying that you're comfortable and financially discounting it a little bit to make others not feel bad, you know, or to be showy. So like I was never of the mindset of increasing my lifestyle. When finances increased, I invested it and put it away for my future self. Other people would be buying big homes or nice cars or living the country club lifestyle. That was never really that never really resonated with me.
What did resonate? What was
I think at that point with friends, that's really when I started financial coaching. You know, there was one of my friends, she was an interiors architect, and she wasn't making a ton of money in San Francisco where it costs a lot to live. And she hadn't started investing in her 401k. So, you know, she and I would go for a walk and we'd be having these conversations. I was like, you need to start doing it. She's like, well, I don't have, if I take $200 out of my paycheck, then I have 200 less. And I was like, yeah, it's not really how it works. There's this whole tax benefit and that kind of thing. So I was like, just do me a favor. Put $100 in your 401k and then come back to me when you get your first paycheck. And she came back. She's like, you were right. I didn't lose $100 in my paycheck. And then she started seeing that amount grow. And then, you know, so it was just really having those conversations and helping people incrementally, trying out ideas with friends, you know, taking what I had learned through my company or through other experiences that I had and really helping other people to do better for themselves then and for their future selves. And that same friend, she then went on to buy a condo in San Francisco, which again, not easy to do, but with some help from her family, she was able to make it happen. And those kinds of things really start to build on themselves. So starting small and incrementally and continuing to build it. There's no magic. You just have to keep doing the same things, and when you get a raise, you put more in your investments versus spending it all. So
I love the moonlighting. I think sometimes our purpose sort of finds us as we are just going about and like living our lives. All of a sudden, there are ideas that catch us by the tail, if you will, and become like, all of a sudden I'm being pulled into sharing more or teaching or doing something. And wow, like the roads start to open and more people are showing interest. How did your financial coaching, starting off moonlighting, how did that start to snowball for you? And what were some of the dominoes that led in your financial life that allowed you to take a risk, certainly in terms of launching a practice? And how was it to get started? I can only imagine that it's audacious, right? To say, let me help you understand this like very powerful thing in your life that has likely dominated you since you were younger, where you have trauma around. I mean, this is no small feat. So let's unpack a little bit of the dominoes that fell, how you decided to take a risk on yourself, and where this eventually led you to.
This is probably 5 years ago where I was starting to think about, okay, I'm almost ready to be done with traveling that I was doing for my career and being away from home all the time and feeling like it was time for me to start thinking about retiring. And I had always thought about that I would retire in my mid-50s. Not having been fortunate enough to have children, I didn't have the expense also associated with children. So it made that a very real goal for me. I was networking with women that I worked with. And we were just talking about, okay, when we retire, what are we going to do? And I was like, I want to do something in the financial world. And so it just kind of came up in conversation with a couple of my coworkers. And one of them mentioned this financial coaching guru that she knew of. And I researched him and didn't really resonate with me. But that search led me to a program that was run by a woman who lives in Arizona. And she had started it. She'd been a financial advisor in corporate accounting and didn't love that. She loved helping people with their budgets. So what she said resonated with me. I decided to invest in the training because I felt like I knew a lot, but I needed to package it all. And her training kind of helped to package it all and start up a business and register it in the state and kind of do all the things you need to do to start a business. So I did that while I was working full time. I was able to fund the startup of the business, which wasn't it wasn't a large investment, getting my own computer and those kinds of things that you need for an online business. I started talking with friends about what I was doing. And one of my friends who is a therapist called me the next day after a conversation. She said, I didn't want to bring this up in front of everyone else, but I have a number of clients who come to me and one of their biggest issues is financial stress. I have one client that I'd love you to consider. So she gave me my first beta client, someone that I didn't know. I agreed to work with them for 3 months at no charge just to get the experience. And it was a 70-year-old couple that was in $70,000 worth of credit card debt living on Social Security and didn't have ways that they could see to do anything other than file bankruptcy. And I was like, no. Let's look at this together. So we came up with a plan for them that pulled them out of debt, got them into a place where they were putting small amounts of money aside for things they were knowing that were going to come up. So they didn't have to increase their debt when those things happened. They had the money to pay for them. For example, like they knew they wanted to travel and see one of their children. So we put a little money aside every month so that when that trip happened, they paid for it before they took the trip rather than amassing more credit card debt and paying for it afterwards and paying all those finance charges. I was able to take something that a couple that had a really big issue. And she was also had, a business. She wasn't treating like a business. So we were able to separate that out of their personal finances. There was some money that we were able to generate from that business to help clear up some of the debt. And they are in a much better place today. And I ended up spending about a year with them. It took us a while to unpack everything, but it was such great learning for me. And it was so impactful that I was able to help people who were the age where it wasn't okay to talk about money. Men or women with family or friends, like people didn't talk about it. So it's always this dirty little secret if you have issues with finances. Like people don't want to talk about that.
Totally. It's personal.
It is, right. Personal finance. That's the first word, right? Very personal. So that was really helpful. And then I, started going to networking events and got a few clients. And then I was like, okay, I think I can make this work. So I left my job. And I had told my boss actually that I was starting up this business because a lot of people have a sort of a side business. And I was like, I'm doing it nights and weekends. It won't impact. And he was like, great. In fact, I might need some of your help was his response. So that was a really good response. So I started the business and then I was like, okay, I'm ready to just do this. And for me, in my late 50s, I call it my periodic part-time job. So I work 3 afternoons a week, see 9 clients a week, and help them with their finances. And I've been able to grow that by word of mouth. A number of clients that I've worked with have sent other people to me. I make sure that my Google reviews are fresh. Every time I finish with a client, I get a review. And I was just talking with someone today who I will probably start working with, and they found me on Google. And I started attending a couple of women's business networking organizational meetings in Vermont. Pretty much every time I would go to a meeting, I would end up with a new client or someone who is a referral partner. And then sometimes I got referrals from one of my clients. I helped her to really grow her business. And part of what we did was we found the money in her business to fund her retirement program at a higher level. And her financial advisor called me and was like, how did you get her to do that? I've been trying to do that for a while. I'm like, because I looked at every line item in the budget and found the money for it and put it towards her future self. And he's like, okay. And then he started sending me clients.
Wow.
Doing the right thing, helping people, having an impact, teaching them to do things better. They talk about it. And I think it's become a lot less taboo. Yeah. And financial coaching is becoming a career that people are thinking about and service that people are thinking about, and people are searching for it. So, making sure I'm on Google, going to business networking events, and talking about it, being open to having conversation. You never know where another referral is going to come from.
I think one of the things that's also important to note is that there are people out there who will tell you to do things, but kind of like the doctor who has a smoking habit. It's one of those things where quite a huge delta between, I think, practitioners who embody that which they practition and those who simply are disseminating good information, who have learned the things and can teach them, but haven't exactly embodied them. And so what I think is really great and incredible about what you've built, Laurie, is that you've embodied many of the principles that I believe a lot of the people you're working with are also aspiring to. So the ability to have income producing properties, right? The ability to be able to work what's seeming like as much as you would like. And I do remember, Laura, we were talking the other day and you're like, yeah, I just came back from teaching a yoga class. I don't know many people who are able to sort of have the flexibility unless it's by active choice to set up their financial life to be able to do things like that. Seems like a very concerted effort. How have your philosophies around money changed today? And what does it mean to you right now as you're looking at how you are generating income, where it's being invested? What is the value and the meaning of it for you today?
Today, what I spend a lot of time on is thinking about the decumulation strategy. So we spend so much time in our careers in the accumulation strategy, creating that net worth. Now I'm really focusing on what's the best way to decumulate and actually use some of that money. And it's a very different skill set, it's a very different mindset. It can be a challenge. You could just ask my husband. It can be a challenge to loosen up the purse strings and be like, okay, I feel comfortable enough that there's enough to take us through retirement that we could actually go on that trip that we've been talking about for a long time, or invest this in solar for our home because it's the right thing to do for the planet, and all of those kinds of things. And it also helps me to inform my clients on, here are some of the things you need to start thinking about in your 30s and 40s and 50s, thinking about and putting money away for retirement. Here's some best practices to think about. And finding some financial advisors that I think will help my clients and connecting them with people that I can work with them together so that it's a team approach to helping people. So there are a lot of ways that it's impacting what I'm doing right now, from how we're looking at what we're spending to how I'm helping clients really think about that future self. And I always use that term, pay your future self. And people are putting money aside.
I love that. I like to use the term hooking up my future self. I think about it in terms of not just money, but also just anything, right? How can I hook up my future self? And sometimes I'll put things on the calendar for like, I don't know, in 3 months, I'll book something like a massage 3 months from now. And I'll be like, oh, how amazing. I just sort of hooked myself up with the time and spaciousness to be able to do this like delicious thing for myself. I think it's so wonderful to have the foresight to gift ourselves money, resources, experiences, time, all of those delicious things that we get to relish in today. I love the stories of especially from women like yourself who are in, I like to say, in this practice of serving. You know, you're really helping other people unlock these very intimate parts of their lives. And really, I believe that in of itself kind of creates a body of work, whether or not we want to believe it, but in service of others and what we do creates this beautiful body of work of impact. As you are starting to think about impact and legacy, I'd love to take you forward to your life at the young age of, 105 and ask you about the impact that you and legacy that you're hoping to leave behind on this planet as you look backwards.
So, I think of that in a couple of different ways. I think about it in, the work that I've done being a manager in a corporation. I've had people come back to me and say, I learned so much about you, not only about the job, but about how to better my financial self, in that period. And I think about the impact on family. So some of my clients, if you will, are family that I take under my wing. And like one of my clients is a niece of mine who's, don't tell anybody else, but she's my favorite. And she starting a career, she has a master's degree and a lot of student debt to go along with it. She's using a lot of the tools that I use with my clients and, really getting her financial self put together. We have her enrolled in the income-driven repayment plan for her student loans. And they're really helping to kind of her think through things. And any of my other female clients that are mothers, especially mothers of daughters, I am asking them to take anything that we use and that they learn from and share it with others, share it with their friends, share it with their children so that we can all evangelize this work and make the conversation not be as taboo as it used to be, so that people helping other people is really what this is all about. And I've also been able to do some volunteer work. So I just accepted a council member position on the Vermont Women's Fund. And what we are charged with and what we're right in the middle of right now is working to grant almost $500,000 to organizations that are set up to help women economically, financially improve their situations. So that's been a really nice part of helping to build that legacy. My husband and I, as we sat down and worked on our trust in the state, we decided that we would set up a donor advised fund. So we have a donor advised fund in which we picked a number of organizations that as a couple we want to support, people that are doing things locally, statewide, countrywide, and internationally. So we fund a lot of different organizations and they're part of our trust in the state that will get additional funding if and when none of us are getting out of here alive, so that'll happen sometime. So those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about with legacy.
I love that. What a way to exercise, again, your values with your money. And I think that is the most beautiful unlock, I think, when you can say, hey, this is where I get the wonderful opportunity to create impact. And I have the resources to be able to see the change or participate in the change that I want to see, which is beautiful. So often we talk about money with an emphasis of investing or money with an emphasis of doing good in the world, philanthropy. But money certainly also can be a lot of fun. And there's a lot of fabulousness that can come and joy that can come with money. Aside from, let's say, the emotional security or mental security with it, there's a lot of fun stuff that can come along with it. Laurie, would you share with me some of the fun, exciting things that you enjoy spending your money on?
Yeah, well, you were talking about self-care, so I think we have a really strong self-care ritual. So, yeah, my husband just came home from having a massage, so he has one, I think, once a month. I have one every other week. making sure that, just keeping your body tuned, that's a great lifestyle habit. We also live fairly close to the Canadian border, and there's a great Nordic spa that we love going to. So at least once a month, we take a day and go to a Nordic spa and just have a water-based, day, a thermal experience where it's, the sauna, the cold plunge, the hot pool. We just did that.
I've been hearing a lot about this Nordic spa, and
Right.
I am like very excited to Nordic spa. I feel like it's going to be a total game changer.
It is amazing. So we've been doing those kinds of things sort of on the regular. You mentioned that I teach yoga. So I do teach yoga at the Trapp Family Lodge, the Sound of Music people. One of the things that I do in my coaching practice is I have people create savings buckets, right? So I practice what I preach. You said that earlier. So I take all the money that I earn from teaching yoga and I put it in an account labeled yoga retreat. So my husband and I just decided earlier this year that we wanted to go on a yoga retreat to some place that we hadn't been before. So we picked, I knew one of my clients actually was having a yoga retreat in Panama. We took 2 spots on the yoga retreat and took the money out of that account to pay for it. And it was just a great experience. And then we, threw some of our own money in and stayed an extra week and did a few things. Traveling is one of those ways that we try to treat ourselves. This fall, we'll take a 6-week vacation and go to the Pacific Northwest where we have a lot of family and friends. And my niece, who I mentioned, is getting married at the end of that time. So our last visit will be for her wedding, and then we'll fly home. But, just taking the time. So we've been doing that probably the last 3 or 4 years, taking at least a month, if not 6 weeks vacation.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing. Travel is such an amazing way to feed the soul. It's like such a delicious way to expose yourself to the world. And that's certainly one of my favorites. Laurie, how can we, the audience, really support the work that you're doing? It's mission critical, I think, that we invest in unlocking and understanding our money journeys. And really, when I talk to a lot of women about their investing or what they're doing, I'm surprised to see how many wealthy women find themselves in sort of poverty mentality, And so to me, it becomes very clear that money is one thing, but then the storytelling and the emotions behind it are really a whole other separate thing that really need to be addressed. How can we, the audience, support you in evangelizing your work? What are you calling in right now? What do you need?
I think it's important that everyone is talking about the financial topics with the women in our circles and the men in our circles, that, we don't shy away from the topics, that we share information about how we're doing things. And it can be really easy to come up in conversation. Hey, your kids are headed off to college. How's that working? How are you affording college? And just sharing ideas and stories. And, maybe you don't have anything to share on that topic if you haven't had kids. But finding a way to connect with other people and making topics less taboo, making sure that if someone, has a concern, they know that there are people out there who can help them. You can Google financial coaching, across the country and find lots of resources. One of the reasons that I wanted to take the financial coaching program that I had was to create a network of other coaches that I knew had similar training and similar beliefs, because I can't help everybody, but making sure that there are other people out there who can, so I can refer people out or find someone who's go to my network and be like, hey, who can help someone on this particular topic? Not something I work on, and I'll usually find 5 or 10 people who are really up on that. So just knowing that there are other ways that people can get support. We all look at the personal athletic coach or the therapist, but having someone who can help with your financial situation, I think is really game changing for people. And that's what a lot of my clients have said. Like, I got a review from a client today who just said she met me at a networking event, read my tag, and it said financial coach. And she's like, oh, I think I need one of those. Hadn't thought about it until that point. But, and then she was like, I didn't know how much I needed you in my life until I saw your tag. We talked. You've been helping me for a year and a half really grow my business and help me think differently about my businesses and how I'm making money. So it's just, showing up, being there. Yeah. And if you know someone who needs help, You can refer them to me. I'll either help them or help them find someone who can.
Amazing. You heard it, ladies. Laurie at Evolution Financial Coaching. Laurie, thank you so much for your spirit, your generosity of time, sharing with me your journey and how you've evolved and changed over these years. I'm excited to see your legacy come to fruition and all the beautiful things that you want unfold in this beautiful lifetime that we get to share. I'm grateful for your time today. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for having me on the show. And thank you for the work that you're doing to bring this information out to people.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Getting Rich Together. Please take a minute to subscribe. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend who is ready to elevate their financial future. Until next time, let's keep getting rich together.